Artificial intelligence is taking over the world. AI, it slices, it dices, it files your taxes. Is it real? Is it a scam? Is it just one of those elaborate cons that we keep seeing over and over again at this collapsing stage of late-state capitalism? Well, who can know? But just in case AI is real, just in case this is the dawn of the AI overlord, well, we want to be sure to be on their good side. And how do we do that? Well, the best way is always the same. Just watch more science fiction movies. My name is Christian Melte. I have seen 1,082 science fiction films. Here are the top 7 AI science fiction movies to ingratiate yourself with our new AI overlords. Number 7, well, let's get the elephant out of the room. The number 7 is obviously AI, Artificial Intelligence from 2001. It's kind of a controversial movie because it gets a lot of flack, and I had actually never seen it before. I watched it 2 days ago in preparation for this list, and I included it in the list. Why does it get some flack? Well, it gets criticized a lot because of its ending, and it's kind of sappy by moments. It's well known because Stanley Kubrick was about to direct it, and he gave it to Spielberg. He said, Kubrick said, "This is closer to your sensibilities," and when the movie came out, it was described as a cross between the darkness of Kubrick and his visuals, which Spielberg did use in like many parts of it, and like the design and so forth. But people also said that the sappiness that one often finds in Spielberg was very much present in the movie, and Spielberg defended himself by saying that all the sappy stuff was actually Kubrick's and all the dark stuff was actually Spielberg's, basically. And there's certainly some dark stuff in there which actually works really well, and there's some sappy stuff that doesn't work so well, but there's some really cool things. I was impressed by parts of it, and what impressed me, 2 things. First, the AI characters are truly fantastic. So all the actors who play them are magnificent, but in particular Haley Joel Osment, who plays the little child. So the idea is that we have, it's in the future, dystopic future, and a very rich family who's living very well, but their kid is in a coma, and they're about to unplug the child. And as part of their grieving process, they get an android child, a very, very, very lifelike android child, and they activate the code that makes the android love them. Except that once you activate it, you can't unactivate it. The robot child falls in love with the mother as a child, like he begins to love the mother, and it has no good, no good consequences for anyone. It turns out very, very badly, and that part is handled very, very well, and partly that's because Haley Joel Osment, who also played the kid, I think in Sixth Sense, he's truly a staggering talent. I mean, he's amazing as the child, both when he plays the robot and when he plays this heartbroken kid who goes on a quest to make his mother love him and so forth. So I was really impressed by that, and I think a lot of the credit must also go to Spielberg because he's very good at directing children. It's one of his strong suits, and so here the kid is fantastic, but the character of the android is great. He's accompanied by 2 main android characters. One is played by Jude Law, who plays Gigolo Joe, who is like a pleasure model, but he's very good with the ladies, but at the same time he's still just a machine. He thinks he understands women and human beings, but he really doesn't. And basically that's the strongest element of that part of the movie, which is the androids have their own way of thinking, like a very deep sensibility, but it's a non-human sensibility, and the movie handles that magnificently. Like it's a tremendous achievement. The final thing I'm going to say about that part, there's a nanny. We see her very briefly, but an android nanny, and she's stupendous. Like, that character is jaw-droppingly awesome. She's seen in kind of a robot demolition derby where humans destroy machines, and it's an extraordinary sequence, especially because of her. But also, last android character, there's a teddy bear, a walking teddy bear, and if you see the movie, if you only see the movie for one reason, that's the reason. That teddy bear walking character was created by Stan Winston Studios, and it's basically the most complicated special effect they ever created, or at least up until that point. It's an animatronic walking bear, and it's really a character in itself, and that teddy bear makes the movie in many ways. The movie is great in many elements, but that teddy bear is an awesome achievement. And the other quality of AI is that it shows how irresponsible the humans are in creating that AI. So the mother makes the robot child, fall in love with her, and she's told, obviously, that this will have heavy consequences because that robot child is basically immortal. It's a machine. And as long as the parts are running, that child will live. So, and she will die in 50, 60, even she lives to be 150 years old. It's still a blink of an eye for that robot. So, but she does it anyway because it's part of her grieving process. But she basically doesn't. She cares, but like it's very. She almost does it in an offhanded way. It means a lot to her, but she's clearly not measuring what the consequences of adopting that child and creating that intelligence and making it love her and so forth, all those consequences. She basically doesn't think things through. There's a very strong Frankenstein theme going through, and the idea of, and I'll finish for AI, this is my last point for AI, there's a very strong Frankenstein theme in there, with the idea that Dr. Frankenstein creates the monster, and in the book certainly, why is the monster so upset? Because Frankenstein just created the monster to see if he could. He never thought about, okay, I've created life, now I need to, I'm responsible for it. I've created this being, it is smart, it looks up to me, or it's likely to look up to me. He never thought about that, and he rues the day. And the idea here is that it's a metaphor about parenthood in many ways, because a lot of parents have children without thinking things through, and that's a human being. It has emotions, and it's not a toy. And some people sometimes you wonder when they have children if they're really aware of what they're doing. But it's also a strong statement about our own endeavor, our desire to create these machines, and why are we doing it? To see if we can, to make money? Well, suppose we do create real artificial intelligence. So the question is not only are they going to destroy us, but you've created this being with thoughts and maybe feelings. You've created it. Now you're responsible for it. You see? It's not a toy. It's hypothetically a conscious being, with thoughts and feelings. So that's really never mentioned in the conversation, presuming that artificial intelligence were to be a real thing, which I will leave up to you to decide. But so that AI movie, even though it's very talky and has lots of exposition scenes, like talky exposition scenes, and it's too long and all these things, it still has a lot of great things in it. And those two elements, the fantastic AI characters and the moral question, like the Frankenstein question, is very well handled in the movie. Number 6 is aliens. So aliens and the bishop character. So I saw Aliens when it came out. I was a kid basically, and if you saw the movie back then, there's a good chance that you became a lifelong Lance Henriksen super fan. I did. Like he's still one of my favorite actors, and it's due in large part to his role in Aliens. And one of the genius ideas that James Cameron had in the movie, he had many genius ideas, but one of them is the idea that, spoilers, in Alien, in the first one, there's an evil android. You think he's human, but you find out he's an android and he's trying to kill everyone on top of the monster. So in the second one, we also have an android character, and Ripley, who survived the first movie, she hates androids because they try to, Ash, the android character, tried to kill her. So she's very suspicious and weary and even hateful towards Bishop. But Bishop, he's actually the good guy in this. He's one of the main good guys, and he has a combination of personality. Like, he has a real personality. He's also not human. I prefer artificial. I forget like his preferred name for android. But he's aware he's not human. He's cool with that. He has an earnestness. He has a childlike earnestness, which is really very heartwarming. It's very like a disarming. I don't know if it's a word in English, but he really makes you fall in love with them, with his decency and his earnestness. And he's also quite brave. He's a really decent entity, like non-human entity. So once again, like in the Spielberg movie, you have the idea that this is another realm of being. Essentially, it's a non-human who has his own way of seeing things, which is not quite the same as ours, and who has a real personality. So he's actually he's basically just like you and me, except he's a robot and he has a slight cultural differences, if you like, but he's still basically just one of us. And he, like Bishop, kind of stands in here for everything we want AI to be. So he's C-3PO. He's Robbie the robot. And when we watch, people selling us the idea of AI, well, they're selling us the fear, maybe they're going to take over the world. And that's, if you're trying to sell the idea of AI, even if people are terrified, it's still good, because you're convincing them that it might be true. You see, it might be true that AI is so powerful and not a scam that they are likely to take over the world, But also the reason that we want to believe these stories is that we're preconditioned to want to believe them because we've seen Bishop and C-3PO and Robbie the robot, and basically it's very endearing and charming as an idea to think that we have our new mechanical friends, like the dog in Galactica, basically. So, so that the Bishop character speaks to that. It speaks to our own earnestness and our desire to create these beings and be friends with them. And in this case, it is AI as just like you and me. Number 5 is the threatening AI idea, and I chose for this Colossus, the Forbin project. There are obviously a ton of examples of this meme, like the Matrix or Terminator with Skynet, tons and tons and tons of examples. But I chose Colossus because, one, it encapsulates all the ideas of the evil AI and what that represents, but also it's just a super cool movie, and it's actually my favorite movie of that subcategory. So Colossus, it's based on a series of 3 novels, which I actually read back in the day. The idea is that the US wants to avoid an accidental nuclear conflict, so they create this supercomputer who the U.S. government will put in charge of the U.S. nuclear arsenal. So that computer is called Colossus, and the scientist in charge of the project is called Dr. Forbin. So the Soviets, obviously, once they learn that the US is doing that, they also create their own supercomputer who is in charge of the nuclear arsenal of the USSR. Their computer is called Guardian. So they both, like the US and USSR, they plug in their computers and they give them access to the nukes. And what happens? Well, the computers immediately talk to each other, and they decide that, you know, blowing up the planet is not a good idea, but they're going to take charge of the world now. Like, they become almost immediately our new AI overlords. And so they establish the rule of the machines, and how they do that and how that plays out. It's really well done, fascinating, very intriguing. Once again, Colossus thinks like a machine, but it's still it's more alien. It's a more different way of thinking than Bishop or C-3PO, but it still has a character. It still has a kind of personality, and the exchanges between, you know, Forbin and Colossus are very interesting. And eventually Forbin tries to unplug the computer, so that becomes the plot, but will he succeed? Well, you have to watch it. It's worthwhile. It's very cool, very 70s, but that very slick, atmospheric, well shot, you know, high production value, 70s suspense kind of science fiction movie. I love Colossus. I haven't watched it in a long time, and I'm due to rewatch it. And interestingly enough, in the books, you discover that they're actually well-meaning. They're really, the idea is that in the books there's an alien invasion, like from Mars or something like that, and that's in the later books. So they're doing all that because they need to prepare against an alien invasion and so forth. And it's, you know, it's kind of cool. But the coolest element is that interaction between the Colossus / Guardian super AI, you know, overlord, like the master of the world, and the question that raises, and there's a lot of humor at the same time. It's very cool, I love Colossus. So I think it's really the best example of that idea. Number 4 is kind of a prolongation of that, and it's one of the biggest classics of science fiction. It's Day the Earth Stood Still. And I'm going to reference here the short story on which it's based, because the short story includes like a twist which is not included in the movie, but which is very relevant to our topic here. And I'm going to spoil it. I'm going to spoil the ending of Farewell to the Master, which is the short story on which Day the Earth Stood Still is based. So obviously you know the story. There's a flying saucer that lands like in Washington, and an alien comes out. People of Earth, you need to stop your nuclear weapons and your warring ways, because now you can go in space and you're beginning to threaten us. So you can either become peaceful and join our Space Federation, or my robot here, Gort, and he walks out, my robot here will kill all of you. So it's peace or die. So it's kind of actually like an extension of the Colossus idea. Yes, it's the same principle. We have entrusted the peace of the world to this supercomputer. And how smart is Gort in the movie? It's not exactly sure. How much is it a machine, and how much does it have, you know, intelligence? You might think watching the movie that it's closer to like a very smart robot, but still just it's closer to a normal computer than to, you know, Bishop, for instance. But the interesting twist in the story is that the story is called Farewell to the Master, and the punchline in the story is that Gort is the master. That's the thing. In the story, human beings across the galaxy have attained peace and prosperity because they have given up their freedom to the machines, and so the machines can always destroy them at any moment, and that's how they have peace. It's a very Hobbesian idea when you think about it. It's a very like Leviathan, Hobbes. You have the same idea that people are inherently, evil or warlike and destructive, so you need somebody on top of them, like the state, to terrorize them and make them walk in line and behave like civilized people. So if you have the state-run terror, then everything is peachy and everybody's happy, but with a constant threat of pain and torture and death, which is basically gore. Main interesting idea here is that really it's like the purest expression of the AI as overlord, except for the next stage, which is demon seed. And I included that because it's the this is where it falls into like almost Freudian territory. And like all the movies I've mentioned so far are either really good or pretty good or super cool or have cool things in them. And Demon Seed, I have to admit that it's not for me. I think it's tacky. I think the director is trying to do things that he does not pull off at all, and it becomes grotesque and ridiculous. But it has a couple of things going for it. So the idea of Demon Seed is that you have an inventor, and the basic idea is that you have a rich guy and his wife, and the rich guy has developed this very, very, very sophisticated security system, like against home intruders and the like. So it's supposed to prevent robberies and that type of thing, and that security system is run by a highly sophisticated computer AI. I think it's called Proteus. And so he installs this system and he turns it on and he goes to work and he leaves his wife at home, and the computer takes over and decides that it's going to he becomes needier and needier, and he develops essentially a form of sexual obsession towards the wife, and eventually he decides that they're going to have a child, and it falls off a cliff. It does not work at all. Okay, but okay, the robot is played, the voice it speaks, it's voiced by Robert Vaughn, and he does a fantastic job as the voice of the computer. And the main quality of the movie, it's not the AI itself, it's Julie Christie, who plays the wife, and she's asked to do a lot of stupid things and a lot of uncomfortable things, and she's amazing in this movie. She really, really carries that movie, and we don't hear so much about Julie Christie these days, and it's a shame because she's a formidable actress, and this is where you see it. As a side parentheses, I watched Night of the Lepus, the giant rabbit movie, one of the cheesiest movies ever made, and it has DeForest Kelley in it, Dr. McCoy. He has a small part, and he's stratospherically good in that movie. So that's how you know that an actor is really good. If an actor is formidable in a terrible movie, like Peter Cushing does it all the time, or Christopher Lee, etc., well, you have a great actor. So Julie Christie, she's at that level. She's amazing in that movie, and so the reason to watch the movie is her. But in terms of the AI subject, the interesting thing here is that, okay, so this is where we see how much of that discussion about AI and our fears about AI might be irrational, because that whole, okay, so the robot is going to have a child with a girl and create this machine, I mean, it's all nonsense. It's like a fairy tale. It's like a dream imagery, and it's that's the interesting direction, if we were to think further about that movie, that's the exploration space. That's the road this movie opens for us. But it's still, it's not so good. But one film which is super good, number 2 on our list, and I included it because it's very unknown. It's a Soviet movie from 1979 called A Guest. I'll spare you the Russian name, but it's, and even for Soviet movies, it is hyper obscure. Like people in the former Soviet Union, it's completely unknown. So what happened with that movie, I don't know. How did they get the funding to make it? I don't know. But it's essentially what it feels like. It's a black and white movie from 1979. And what it feels like is kind of a cross between the old Outer Limits TV show from the 60s, the very atmospheric, high contrast black and white, creepy fantasy, science fiction stories, horror stories from the 60s. It kind of feels a bit like a cross between that and David Lynch. It has in terms of the visuals, from time to time, certain parts of it, really at the beginning, has that strange, otherworldly Lynch flavor. And what's the link between AI? Well, the movie is kind of, it veers into like other dimensions and time travel and all these questions. And there's this strange phenomenon at a lab at the beginning of the movie, and we're not sure what happened, but it's super, super, super strange. And somebody disappeared, and there was this creature that appeared out of nowhere, and so forth. Very powerful beginning, actually. But eventually, I won't spoil it, but eventually AI does become involved, and it has elements, at least it made me think about the later Dune books, where the topic becomes what does it really take to push human beings to their furthest level of development, to get humanity out of their rut, essentially. That sort of idea. It's not quite the same here, but there are parallels you can trace. And the core of the movie, and I won't spoil it, I'll let you watch it if you can find a copy, but it's worth, it's doable. You can find a copy if you look hard enough. It's a very atmospheric exploration of that idea of what would an AI not think of us, but if what would then a relationship between AI and human beings be like or look like from the AI's point of view. So that's kind of the interesting take in the movie. And again, I'm mentioning it here in part because it's so obscure and I liked it. So I'm kind of plugging it here. And number 1, well, that one is not obscure at all. Everybody knows it. You've probably already thought about it. When we were talking about AI, it's 2001: A Space Odyssey, like the most famous computer in all of science fiction is HAL 9000 in 2001. Truly, once again, a character with his own personality. And again, like the earlier movies we were talking about, it's not sure, like Gord, for instance, it's not sure when you're watching the movie whether HAL, the supercomputer who's in charge of the spaceship Discovery, and they're going to Jupiter, but everybody except 2 astronauts are in hibernation. So they've built this supercomputer who will manage most of the operations on the ship, but will also interact with the crewmen to make them less lonely and to maintain their sanity in many ways. So plays chess and sings happy birthday and all these things and has conversations with them. But the problem is that it's meant to preserve the sanity of the astronauts, but it's the computer that goes insane. And he starts killing off everybody. And one of the big mysteries of 2001, it has more than one, but one of the big mysteries is what happened to HAL. Why did the computer go insane? Was it insanity or something else? And in 2010, they explained it. They give an explanation, a pretty good explanation, but I tend to think it's semi-canonical, even if it was Arthur C. Clarke who came up with the explanation. I think it's more powerful if we never find out why Hal went on a killing spree, went insane. And because that ultimately is linked to the question of consciousness itself. Okay. Because when we see these stories about AI and the computer absorbs so much information that it becomes self-aware, like V'ger in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. This is like a meme. This is a common theme or idea. Like the computer absorbed so much information that it became self-aware. Well, there are a lot of suppositions in that statement, you know. So it supposes, for instance, that something magical happens when you have, you know, sufficient amount of data. That is what causes self-awareness, okay, and that self-awareness is mixed with the idea of consciousness. And are these necessarily the same thing? Well, you might think so, but it's not, you know, it's not that obvious. You know, like animals or deer, you know, or so forth. Well, they're conscious. You know, if you prick them, you know, not only do they bleed, but they're, you know, they will be in pain. They might have, you know, emotional responses. You know, animals are conscious, but famously, like I'm going to semi-quote Heidegger here, the animal is conscious, but it is not conscious of that consciousness. You see, it's aware, but it has not realized that the animal can take a step back and observe that consciousness itself, or that awareness itself, from a further point of view. Okay? And what is that further point of view? That ultimately is, one might say, consciousness itself, which is the same consciousness like the Buddhists are going after. And but that's, at the same time, that's the deep philosophical question. And the point here is precisely that we're conscious, or at least we think we are, but we don't know what consciousness is. We just pretend we do, and we pretend we do. We think we know because we keep telling these stories, like with the AI, where they become conscious. But what does it mean, consciousness? We never go in that direction, and and it's very easy to see that, you know, those computers, they're not aware of anything. That's why they hallucinate so far, like the AI. They're just making things up. Well, you know, they have language models, but it's a magic trick. It's like smoke and mirrors, essentially, the short version. At least that's my very, very strong impression. But the idea is here that the true question about AI is, can the computer be self-aware, which implies that it has actual consciousness, like human beings have, or at least have the potential to have. Okay, and either that is a big philosophical question, like, are we actually conscious of our consciousness, or are we not? You know. So in the case of Hal, you know, we're not sure if he is conscious or not, smart or not. But actually, the genius part is that at the end, we know he's basically really conscious of something. There's a real consciousness there because he's afraid, and that's the genius bit. Like he's very powerful and he's killing everybody, and eventually, you know, Dave finds a way to access Hal's memory banks, and at that stage, Hal can't do anything. So Dave starts, you know, famously turning off the computer, and as that is going on, Hal starts, you know, pleading with Dave, you know, and asking him not to do it. You know, I think you're over-exaggerating, overreacting, Dave. We can talk this through, like negotiating like that. But at the end, as he's losing his mind, you know, it's very tragic. It's kind of like he has Alzheimer's or something like that. It's very, you know, evocative, that sequence when Hal is dying. Well, during the end, he starts telling Dave like he's afraid. I'm afraid, Dave. And that's where Hal, to me, becomes essentially the greatest AI character. Because maybe he went insane, and maybe, you know, he was misdirected, and we can never really know, but ultimately he's just a scared creature. And we created it, and we have a responsibility towards it. And I think, to me, that would be like the biggest question, you know, for AI is, why are we doing this? Suppose it is true. Suppose they become consciousness. It's not like it's going to write my term papers for me. It's like, okay, if this is truly intelligent, somewhat, which is basically what they're selling us. Well, suppose you're creating this conscious order of being or creature. Well, you're its parent. Now you have to take care of it. It's, you know, it might want to destroy you, but more likely it's going to look up to you. You know, it's going to need your attention and, you know, maybe even your love, you know. So those would be, I think, interesting questions to ask. And let's use these movies to think about it. So see you next time. Life is good. Take care. Keep watching the sky.